Good afternoon and welcome to the first day of the American Gem Trade Association's Dynamic Seminar Series. Wim Vertriest is GIA's Manager of Field Gemology and has participated in GIA field expeditions on different continents, focusing on colored gemstone mining areas to collect samples for GIA's research. Wim oversees the Field Gemology Department and is in charge of GIA's colored stone research collection in Bangkok. He graduated from the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. He obtained a master's in geology in 2014, specializing in geodynamics and geofluids, and gained his FGA and GG diplomas. Wim has been working at GIA since 2015 and has authored and co-authored articles on new gemstone localities, updates on existing mining localities, in-depth gemological studies, and treatment experiments. Please join me in welcoming Wim Vertriest.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Everyone can hear me clearly? Yeah. Perfect. I think for the people back there, the screen's on that side, so there's a lot of seats on that side, so if you don't see the screen, there's still time to move. So I first of all want to thank all of you, and especially thank AGTA to give me the opportunity to come talk about field gemology. Field gemology is something that's very dear to my heart, and it's something that a lot of people have an intuitive understanding of already. But I wanted to start off by saying what field gemology is. Field gemology is doing gemology in the field. Thank you so much for coming. We'll take any questions now. There's obviously more to it than that. Field gemology is really about understanding your gemstones, and I want to take like the next 45 minutes or so to go into it, what that really means. So why does GIA do this? This is where I want to start. I think if we look at GIA, GIA is a laboratory, and first we have to go to the essence of a gem lab. Why are the gem labs here? The gem labs are here to answer questions from the gemological industry. These questions have evolved over time. One of the first questions that came up was, what is my stone? Is this a piece of glass? Is this an iolite? Is it a ruby? Is it a sapphire? To this day, that is an extremely important question for any gem lab out there. But of course, with the industry evolving, those questions changed. People started asking other questions to gem labs. One of these questions was it altered? Did my stone come out of the ground the way I see it right now? Or did it come out of the ground at all? The whole synthetics and treatment debate. Synthetics, we've dealt with that in the colored stone world in the 80s, 90s. Diamond is still struggling and grappling with that right now. But for example, treatment, if you go back 40 years, nobody really cared whether a sapphire was heated or non-heated. While today, that is one of the biggest make or break things for a stone. So that is a question that gets asked to gem labs as well. Was my stone treated? Was my stone a synthetic? Is it a natural material? And then in the last couple of years, the last 15 years or so, a third question was asked. And that is, where is my stone from? The whole origin question. Started with ruby, sapphire, emerald, but is now expanding that debate to all the other stones, basically. So these are all questions that gemological labs try to answer. But how do we find these answers? It would be amazing that we had a machine where we could put the stone into and just a GPS coordinate came out. But unfortunately, that machine doesn't exist and probably will never exist. The way that we try to answer all these questions, and these answers, you're familiar with that, because that is what you see on reports. That is where we say whether your stone, what your stone is, the identification, the treatment or synthetic question, the origin question for certain stones. That is all information available in the reports, but the answers given on that report are all built on research. So research is the fundament for all the services that we offer at GIA. Whether that is that basic identification, which is sometimes an extremely complex question, or origin determination, which can sometimes be a very straightforward question, but most of the time that's actually very complex. But what does that mean, doing proper research? I think for me, proper research, we built that on 3 pillars. The first pillar is that you need qualified, experienced staff. You need people with the right degrees, people with the right backgrounds. So I'm using this photo of my colleague Jim Shigley, who's going to be up on stage for a talk tomorrow. I'm not going to date anyone here, but this picture was taken the year I was born, so it obviously says a lot about his experience as well. And there's no doubt about his qualifications either. Then there's also the equipment and the instruments. There's no denial that modern gemology relies quite heavily on advanced instrumentology. But we also have to keep in mind that a lot of equipment is only as good as its user. I would trust a qualified gemologist with a $5 loop over an idiot with $1 million lab setup any given day. So that is something that is also included in equipment and instruments, because right now any idiot with $20,000 can go buy a piece of equipment and start printing wiggly lines and spreadsheets full of numbers. But interpreting that, that is the real art. And I use the word art here because we're going beyond science. This is extremely complex. But even past that, if you have an army of PhDs in geoscience, solid-state physics, the whole thing, you have $1 billion worth of equipment that you know how to use. All the research they're going to produce is going to be worthless if they don't have reliable samples. If you do a study on Rwandan amethyst, and you're not even sure that your amethyst is 100% from Rwanda, you're just wasting everyone's time. So that reliable samples aspect, that is very often overlooked. But what does that really mean, a reliable sample? And I'm going to use a quote here from someone else who's much more respectable than I am, and that is Sir David Attenborough. Where in a video, where in a documentary about research collections and museums, he said the following thing: that a research library associated with collections is almost of greater importance than the gemstones themselves. Unless you know where the gem came from exactly and when it came from exactly, you're missing a lot of very, very important information. And that information does not only come from the gemstone itself, but from the circumstances of documentation that should accompany every scientifically collected specimen. What he's basically saying here is that if you collect a bag of stones, all you have is a bag of stones. That is not a reliable collection. So how do we put that into practice? Because that theory is really beautiful. Build a reliable collection, do all the research on it. Now, if you want to build a reliable collection, you've got to go where the stones are. So you collect material there, you note down the stone information, locality information, what is this place called, the GPS coordinates, so you can trace it back, link that to other things. But the most important thing is to go where the stones are, because that way you find reliable samples. If you want to find Mahenge spinels, the best place to go is to the Ipanko Valley in Mahenge and get your spinels right there. Because you can be pretty sure that any stone you take out of the rock there is actually going to be from that place. But going where the stones are also means something different. Because 1 week a year, most stones in the world are right here in Tucson, Arizona. So it is extremely convenient to see a lot of stones there. Because to get to Mahenge, it'll take you 3 days to get there. You'll be able to spend 1 day there. You have to be lucky enough that you see stones come out of the ground, and then 3 days back. So that's the same amount of time I spend at the AGTA show. But at AGTA, I've already seen this morning more Mahenge spinels than I've seen during my visit to Mahenge. But I think we all intuitively understand that the stones that I collect here in Tucson are going to have a different reliability grade than the ones I collect in Mahenge. So that is why at GIA we put a very strong emphasis on the buying conditions. What is the relationship between me collecting that sample and how it came out of the ground? Because that will give us an idea of how much can we trust this? How reliable is the information we can get from it? Because it doesn't mean it needs to be discarded, but it gives us an indicator of how much weight can I give to this data, if this data is off or if this data is correct. So we have a scale there where we assign a code to every single one of our samples, with an A-type being the most reliable. An A-type sample being the gemologists from GIA mined the stone themselves. So here we are in the Paraíba mines in Brazil, where we are hammering stones straight out of the rock. And that was a very good day for us, because we were able to collect a bunch of crystals directly out of the rock. So that was a fun day, and we are 100% sure that these stones are actually from there and that they are untreated. So we are extremely sure an A-type gemologist. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't happen every day. Not every rock I hit with a hammer, a 10-carat ruby comes out. Fingers crossed that that ever happens, but I don't think I'm gonna meet this moment again. Then a B-type sample would be when the gemologist sees the stone come out of the ground, when we've witnessed the mining. For those of you that had the pleasure, the privilege to visit a gem mine, a lot of gem miners are okay with you visiting, but you keep your hands in your pockets, because you could pick up one rock and walk out with $1 million. So if we see the stone come out of the ground, even if I didn't see it myself, we would classify it as a B grade. So here we see this guy who is collecting opals in Brazil. So we are pretty confident that this is actually Brazilian material. And C-type material, there we go. C-type material would be collected from a miner at the mine. So here we are looking at Mozambican ruby parcels at one of the large-scale ruby mines in Mozambique. These stones are still at the mine. We're collecting them directly from the miner, but I didn't see him come out of the ground. So this is a collection of material that was accumulated over days, weeks, maybe months, but we're still on site. I still have a GPS coordinate of the hole in the ground where this material came out from. The next grade would be a D-type. D-type, I get it from a miner, but not at the mine. So these gentlemen were sapphire miners up in northern Kenya, who we met along the road, and we were able to collect material directly from them. So they took it out of the ground, but I didn't see the place where it came from. So I don't have a GPS coordinate where that material came from. I also have no indicator whether these guys might be lying. These stones might be coming from somewhere else. They might be coming from a different country. So we see we're already a little bit less reliable there. Then an E-type would be buying from a trader in the local market. So here we're buying spinels in Luquien, this mother-daughter duo who drove a very hard bargain. But you can already feel that this is less reliable. We're not dealing with the miners directly. We're dealing with brokers, with traders who might have accumulated parcels, who might have mixed parcels from different mines, from different sources, from different countries even. So but it is a very convenient way to collect a lot of material. We can see here the amount of spinel on that table. You could do a lot of research on that. And then we have F-type, which is the last one, which is collected from a trader in the international market. So if I buy stones, for example, in Bangkok, in Chantaburi, here in Tucson, we are completely disconnected from the mine, from the source of that stone. That doesn't mean that these stones are less valuable. We just have to put that in its context. And that context is preserved in that A, B, C, D, E, F grade. So with that in mind, GI has built a colored stone reference collection over the last 15 to 18 years, where we put a lot of emphasis on origin and treatment status. So that research collection, it is not full of extremely beautiful gems or the most magnificent crystal specimens. What we care about for that collection is how sure can we be of the origin and how sure can we be of the treatment. And that means how sure can we be of the label. That doesn't mean it has to be untreated, but if I buy it as a beryllium diffused, I want to be sure that it's actually beryllium diffused. If I buy it as a glass filled, I want to be actually sure that it's glass filled. If I buy it as untreated, I want to be sure that it's untreated. If I buy it from Mozambique, I want to be sure it's from Mozambique. So that's where we put a lot of the emphasis, most of the value in for our collection. So right now, that's a little over 32,000 samples. This number is from September. I think now we're a little closer to 33,000, with obviously a very heavy emphasis on ruby and sapphire, emerald, spinel, but we are adding more and more other gemstones as well. Now, why do we focus on those stones? We have to go back to that first slide. Field gemology is there to support GI research. GI research who supports IDENT, who supports the services. And most of the questions we get in our services are not on chalcedony or kunzite. They are for ruby and sapphire. So that is where the big questions are asked. So that is where most of the research effort goes to. That is where most of the samples are required. So that is why most of the emphasis in our collection goes towards those stones. But nowadays we see a lot more questions for alexandrite, opals, garnets, specifically the green garnets, tsavorite and demantoids, which we are offering origin for as well. So that's why we're focusing the last couple of years more on those stones. So these are all the expeditions that we've done. I think you can kind of see that we kind of covered the whole globe. A lot of the color codes kind of speak for itself. I don't think I have to explain to you what the red, green, and blue stands for. I think you can figure that out on your own. But we're obviously a very heavy focus on Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and then East Africa, where a lot of exciting gem discoveries have happened in the last couple of decades, like we heard in the last talk. But I can see some of you think that's all really amazing for GIA, that you do all this stuff, but why should I care? Why should I, as a jeweler, a cutter, a wholesaler, a consumer of gemstone, lie awake about all of this thing? Why should I care about field gemology? And I think I just explained why field gemology is very important for GIA, but the next part of the talk I want to focus on why field gemology is so important for everyone in the trade. And I literally mean everyone. And I'm going to do that by breaking it down into 4 pillars and really going a little bit in depth on all of those. If we want to do field gemology and understand better what it means, we obviously have to start with the gems. If you want to do field gemology, you've got to understand your gemstones, and that means different things. You've got to understand the complexities behind it. Inclusions, what is the story that inclusions can tell me? What can I see in the microscope that can tell me about gemstones? But also understanding the impact of advanced instrumentology. Not everyone here has to be able to operate an LAICP-MS or even know what that stands for. But you've got to realize that that has a very big impact on modern gemology. Understand what the limitations of these things are, understand what the possibilities of these things are, and understanding how that will change our understanding of gems. And then understanding gemological nomenclature as well. Gemological nomenclature is a messy arena, to say the least, and there is a lot of debate there, but if you don't even understand the basic gemology, there is no way that you can have that debate, for example, on Paraiba nomenclature and what that definition is. Without the proper gemological background, proper gemological knowledge, there is no way that you can have that debate with an equal amount of ratio and emotion. And you're always going to lean to one or the other, because we have to keep that in mind. Both of these things are very important in all of this. So that is the gems. Let's see. Oh, doesn't want to go to the next one. There we go. The next pillar for field gemology would be the earth, understanding the impact that our gems have on the earth. And that is twofold for me. That could be understanding how gems come out of the ground, how they are found, what that means. Because I think we all know that gemstone mining does not look like this. It would be quite amazing to just do a shift with your trusty raccoon friend and by lunchtime come out with a bucket of faceted gemstones of all kinds of varieties with top clarity. But that is not the reality. The reality of gemstone mining kind of looks like this. This is what a gemstone mine looks like in reality. When you see this clip, and I tell you that these guys in the tanzanite mine sometimes do this for 12 hours a day for 6 months straight without finding a single tanzanite, I don't want to hear anyone ever complain again about the price of tanzanite. Because this is what goes into gem mining. This is the reality. This is what gemstone mining looks like. And if more people realize that, you will get more appreciation for your gemstones. Gemstone mining looks like this. Sometimes it is an extremely large scale, where we see large-scale operations that have other implications. What are the impacts of this on the environment? What are the impacts of this on local communities? And these are important questions we need to ask ourselves. Because gemstones come from the earth, which means they're going to leave a trace there, which means that we are leaving a trace there. So we have to make up our mind, what are we okay with? What is justifiable for us? There is not necessary that you have an answer to it, but it is very important that you ask that question. What is the impact on environment? I can show you this image of an area where there's a lot of sapphire mining going on, but the sapphire mining is actually limited to that part in the bottom here, where we see the bare earth. All the burnt down forest, that is for other purposes. That is not the impact from gemstone mining. Very complex story, but a complex story that involves all of us. Here we have another example where we have 2 types of mining in the same video. This is a tsavorite mining area in Tanzania, the Lamshuku area, where we have a really big area in the front here, where we can see that everything is dug up by the local miners. So this is an area that's accessible by artisanal miners, a lot of people gain employment there. But we can also see that land can be used for anything else. If that were valuable agricultural land, you can't grow anything there. And then I want to point out that little shack in the back there. I'm just going to move over here because the pointer's not working. This one right here, keep that one in mind. That is the entrance of a tsavorite mine that goes underground, which employs twice the amount of people than that big area on the right. So the one I circled in white is the area where people are mining on the surface. The area I circled in black is the area where people are mining underground and employs twice the amount of people. Which one is the best style of mining? There is no answer to that, but both have very different consequences, which a lot of people never thought about. So we need to ask these questions as well. Then there's a second part about understanding the earth, and that is understanding the geology a little bit more. I'm going to say this twice. All your gemstones come out of the ground. I'm going to say it again. All your gemstones come out of the ground. If you think really hard about that, that's ridiculous. All these things formed under our feet, and we have very little understanding of how a lot of that happened. The geological understanding of gemstone formation is really only taking baby steps right now. There are so many things that we don't understand yet. At a small scale, on a single deposit, how do these things grow over here? To a larger scale, and I'm going to give you a larger scale example, because I think most of you are gemologists, so you are familiar with the concept that gemstone deposits are related to mountain forming events, that in the roots of mountains is where you find most gemstones. That is the perfect place. So if we look at the biggest mountain chain on the planet right now, the Himalayas, you can see them right there. They basically go from Central Asia all the way to Southeast Asia. So we would think that whole area would be full of gemstones. Big mountains results in big and nice gemstones. But if I plot the most important gemstone deposits in the world on it, you see that they're all right there. In the center of the Himalayas, there's almost nothing to be found there. There's some anecdotal tourmaline occurrences, a little bit of a ruby deposit in Nepal, but all the real Himalayan gemstones are towards that western part, the Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Pakistan area, and towards the eastern part with Burma, southern China, northern Vietnam. Why isn't there anything to be found in the peak Himalayas? Very intriguing geological question. The third part I want to focus on is the trading. So we had understanding the gems, we had understanding the earth, and then there is understanding the trading. How does a gem get from point A to point B? If we want to know what happens to a gem after it is cut, there are literally libraries dedicated to it. The jewelry design process, the jewelry manufacturing process. There are MBAs dedicated to jewelry sales. But if you want to know how a rough gemstone ended up from a hole in Tanzania to a cutter in Bangkok, good luck figuring that out. So understanding that is also a very important part of field gemology. How do gemstones move through the world? Where does value get added? What are the expertise required to it? And I have this example here. This is an image from a buyer in Ilakaka, Madagascar, the most important source of sapphires right now. Where you would expect this is stones that end up in the highest jewelry, extremely popular right now. You would expect all that professionalism is carried out throughout the supply chain. No, that stone that ends up in $1 million piece in a window in Place Vendôme, that was first inspected by a guy with 10x plastic goggles and a torch with flimsy batteries. The only tools he had accessible to him was a small battery-powered scale, a bowl of water, and a cardboard box that he painted himself. That is where the value started. That is where the gem that will cost $10,000 a carat at the end, these are the skills that got it started. These are true masters in their craft. Because we are all privileged to sit at our desk with our microscopes and our loupes and our polariscopes and our refractometers. But the reality of rough gemstones starts here, with a torch and a 10x loupe, where these people decide the future of that gemstone. How complex these trade chains can be. How many people are really involved with adding value, with moving these stones throughout the world? From going from the miner in the bush to the broker that puts the parcels together, to the parcels that then move to the local trading city, that are then picked up, that are moving to a manufacturing hub, where they are maybe treated, where they are maybe cut, then move to a bigger trading center, where they eventually end up in the States or whatever consuming country, and they go through different kinds of jewelers, wholesalers, retailers, and then the final client. But the amount of experts that were involved before that is very often overlooked, which means that if we don't even know that these people exist, it is impossible for us to help and support these down the line. So we need to realize that how much value is added to our gemstones before we even get to see them. Because before a stone ends up here in a booth in Tucson at JGX or at AGTA, maybe 15 people have added value to that stone already. Speaking of value creation, I'm going to take a little detour here because I think it's very important for all of us to also understand this, especially in the US, in Europe, in more consuming countries, where people very often have a very skewed vision on treatment, where treatment is probably the most important thing to do value addition. Because if there is no market for the low-grade gemstones, the mining will stop and the high-quality material will not be found. As one rough trader told me, if you don't have a market for the 50 kilograms of brownish garnets, you will never find the 10-carat ruby. Which means that we need a market for those other gemstones. No single mine runs on the 1% alone. We need to move all the other stones. And treatment is one way to upgrade that lower material, that lower grade material. Because in the end, it is about, is this stone pretty? And treatment is one way to make stones that are not as pretty, a lot prettier, and make them more attractive in the trade. We're not going to get billions of dollars for them, but they're going to pay the bills and keep us in business until we do find that billion-dollar stone. That is where treatment comes into play. So treatment allows us to get a lot more value out of the full mine run. Plus, treatment provides us with a range of gemstones in different price ranges. We'd all like to have the untreated big rubies, but in the end, the reality of our wallet usually limits us there. So we will have to buy a treated sapphire, which isn't the worst stone, it is just a reality. So treatment is necessary and keeps the gemstone supply chain alive. Treatment of gemstones is the only reason that all of us are in this room today and have a career in gemstones. Without treatment, the gemstone industry would have died centuries ago. But we also have to acknowledge that rarity is an important factor for high-end stones. And untreated fine stones are rarer than treated fine stones. On top of that, there are certain treatments where the care and durability can be impacted. Maybe the color's not stable, maybe the mechanical durability is lowered. So it means that undisclosed treatment is not acceptable. The only reason we have a job right now is because treatment is there. The reason why we might not have a job in 5 years is because we're not disclosing that treatment. So undisclosed treatment is not acceptable. And ignorance is no excuse. We're all adults, we're all gemologists. There is no way that we can say, wir haben es nicht gewusst is not going to fly anymore. We didn't know about this is not a relevant excuse anywhere. So that is something that we also have to keep in mind, that we have to keep training ourselves on detecting those treatments and being transparent about that. That doesn't know that you as an individual, as a jeweler, as a retailer, as a wholesaler, needs to have all the answers. But you need to know where to go ask that question and maybe refer it to someone else. And that is again why Gem Labs are here, to answer those questions that maybe you cannot answer yourself. So I'm going to show this slide and we could say it all together. There are no bad treatments. There is only bad disclosure. I'm going to leave this up so everyone can take a picture of it and hang it above their bed and in their office, because this is probably the most important slide of the whole talk. So that was a little detour about treatments. Back to the last pillar of field gemology. We talked about the gemstones, we talked about the earth, we talked about the trading and how value gets added throughout that chain. The last part of doing field gemology is understanding your source better. Because we have to know every stone comes from underground, that's understanding the earth, but every stone also comes from a place where it means different things, a place where it has left an impact, a place where it has meaning. And that is something that adds so much value to every single stone that we deal with that we need to do a really good job at keeping track of that. If you're able to sit down in Mogok, in someone's house where they've lived for generations, and look at spinels and rubies on a tray that their ancestors used to look at rubies and sapphires, you understand what rubies mean in Burma. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about this right now. And that is what we should all get, because you should look at a stone and get goosebumps just from the story behind it. One of the things I often tell you, if you don't like emeralds, and there's probably going to be people here, if you want to solve that problem, talk to any Colombian here for more than 10 minutes, and emeralds are going to be your favorite gemstone. Because you're going to understand what emeralds mean in Colombia. You're going to understand, you need to understand what rubies mean in Burma, what sapphires mean in Sri Lanka, what they represent, what the cultural, the economic, the impact is of those stones on people's lives, on people's communities, understanding the source. Now, understanding the source is not always a happy story. It's a brutal world out there, and it trickles into our trade. Understanding how the rising price of steaks has an impact on black opal production. Understanding how climate change is throttling supply of tourmalines and spinels and sapphires from Pakistan and Afghanistan. Understanding how political instability in Congo is reducing or severely influencing the availability of tourmalines in the market. Those are things that when you read them in the news might seem like a faraway story. But a lot of these things have a very direct impact on our trade. This is also part of understanding the source. This is the reality of a Burma low heat right now. Burma is under attack. Mogok is under attack. This is the hotel I used to stay in when I went to Mogok. That has been bombed and leveled last August. We need to understand that our Burma stones that we look at come from a place where they mean something, where they have an impact. Whether we are going to judge on that impact is a different story. But the fact that we never ask those questions or never ask them enough is one of the reasons why we're struggling with so many debates. Are Russian diamonds good or bad? If we've done our field gemology, we would get a better understanding of that, or at least acknowledge that it's a very complex affair. One example I want to bring up are these emeralds. This is a source in Pakistan that produces extremely fine emeralds, and especially in smaller sizes. This is the Swat Valley. The Swat Valley, which has been in the news for the last couple of decades for a number of reasons. Mostly for this reason, that it was under Taliban control, a very bloody battlefield, and a lot of that funding came from the emerald extractions. So I think most of us would agree, Swat emeralds, not super cool. Maybe we should shy away from that. But if I told you that that is the same place as this, that right now the Taliban has driven out, it is completely restored, and it is one of the biggest economic success stories in all of Central Asia, where it is referred to as Pakistan's Switzerland. It is the biggest domestic holiday destination there. We would say, well, maybe these emeralds aren't that bad. That the ski resorts that people have been able to build there, the hotels, the resorts that they've been building there, have been funded with emerald money. That is actually a really good story. So we have to acknowledge that these things are very fluid. They're extremely complex, but that's not an excuse to not keep an eye on it. So I want to wrap it up with saying that field gemology, it's more than doing gemology in the field. It's more than visiting mines. Field gemology is really about seeing the context. It is not focusing on the gemstone on the tree. It's trying to see the whole forest around it. It's understanding that your gem is a part of a bigger thing. If we only wanted the prettiest, biggest, brightest colors, cleanest rocks, we'd only be dealing with synthetics. But there is more to a gem than it. There is a background. There is a whole forest, a whole ecosystem around it. And field gemology is about understanding that better, whatever that means for you. That means a very different thing for GI as a laboratory than for GI as education. Then for you as a jeweler, it might mean something completely different. But it is about getting a better understanding of what your gemstone means. It is about understanding the connection between your gemstone, the place it came from, the source, the journey it has taken to trade, and the mark it has left on the earth. I can tell you that Thai food is really spicy, but until you felt the burn of the chili, you don't know what I'm talking about. I can tell you that Tucson is the best place to come look at gemstones, but until you've stumbled into a hotel room full of rough, you don't know what I'm talking about. I can tell you that Brazil throws the best parties, but until you've danced at Carnival, you don't know what I'm talking about. I can tell you that your gemstone is really unique and special, but until you've done your field gemology, you don't really know what I'm talking about. So with that, I just wanted to leave you. If there are any questions, I'll be very happy to take them. And I want to thank you all for inviting me and staying here for the last 45 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wim.
Thank you,
Questions. How many trips have you taken? Have you added these up?
Probably close to 40 by now. Yeah.
Lots of air mileage at this point? You get upgraded?
More hours in the back of a pickup truck than actually in the plane.
Questions? Yes, all the way in the back.
Do you know what the geological reason is for why there's no gemstones in the base of the Himalayas?
Right, so the question is, do I know why there are no known gem deposits in the heart of the Himalayas? No, because it's probably a very complex question. Geology is extremely diverse. There's a lot of factors influence, and this is a more of a bigger scale question. The easiest explanation might be because this is a very active mountain chain. So maybe right now, under the Mount Everest, there might be cooking up a lot of different things, but it'll take a long time before Mount Everest is ground down and we could see them. That is probably the most straightforward explanation I can give you, but the nitty and gritty of it is probably a lot more complex.
Dick?
John Saul says that the reason for that is the twisting motion.
That is absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of factors that come into play, and that twisting motion towards the end, which would allow a lot of fluids in there and lubricate the thing, that might help a lot of things form there. Yeah, we have a question in front.
Is there more of a trend towards laser marking some of the stones now for origin and
I don't really know what that means, laser marking a stone.
like some of the diamonds, they'll actually have the brand or they'll laser the diamond so you can see that. Do they do that more now for origin as well?
I think these are tools you can use that might address that, but they are not the answer to that question. Laser marking a stone, engraving a stone, has, for me, as much value as writing it down in a notebook or putting it on the blockchain or whatever. If the fundamental question is, if that stone was mixed from somewhere else at the start and you write a wrong number on it, it is still a wrong number. So whatever way you write that number or you tag that stone throughout the supply chain, if you tag it wrong, it's tagged wrong, whatever method you use.
More questions? Yes, all the way in the back.
Right, so the question was, any suggestions on how to better tell these stories to the end consumer? I think the first thing is we need to know these stories. If you don't know that story, if you don't know where your stone is from, if you don't know who is involved, and I'm not saying you need to figure out every person that has touched that stone ever, but every little bit of extra information you have exponentially increases the value of that stone. Because the more you know your stone, the more you can share about it, the better you can tell that story. So if you already know where it comes from, if you know what that place looks like, that's already adding a lot of value. And it's unrealistic to expect that we can ever know the full story. But we should all take more steps to understanding more of that story. And I think that's where we need to start. If we understand that story better, we care about that story, we will automatically radiate that towards anyone else that we come in contact with.
Yes, right here.
This may be putting you on the spot, but can you think of a surprise or discovery that occurred during one of your travels having to do with gemstones or one of the mines maybe?
Well, it was not as surprising for me, but for a lot of people it comes as a surprise. The majority of rubies I saw in Mogok were glass-filled Madagascar stones. So I think for those of you that have traveled to gemstone mines, that is probably not as surprising, but that is the reality of globalization, that these stones go everywhere.
Yes.
Gee, does that mean we should buy our rubies from Afghanistan?
I think you should buy pretty rubies from anywhere you can.
Yes.
There was comment made in an earlier lecture about AI being used for origin determination. Is that even possible?
Well, I think AI is going to be an incredible tool to help us out. But it is only going to be a tool. AI has the potential to be what, compared to a regular computer, to what a microscope is compared to a loupe. So it's going to allow us to do bigger and better things if we can handle it responsibly and work it out correctly. But it is not going to fundamentally change the question or the process. It is just going to be a more efficient way to deal with these questions. But that is towards the laboratory side, where we actually are going to have a talk about that tomorrow, where I'm going to be joined by two of my colleagues, I think tomorrow at 11 o'clock, where we're going to go into the science of origin determination more. So that, I think that's that's a question that we will try to address tomorrow, and we'll do a better job at it then.
More questions? Yes.
The reference collection you built at GIA, how is that used between the different labs, and what is the vision what's next?
Right, so the question was about the reference collection that we have at GIA and how we actually use that from a practical point of view in an international organization. So the majority of that collection is based in Bangkok. And again, if you want to know more about that, the talk tomorrow where we're actually going to get into that. So it's about 33,000 stones. Most of them are in Bangkok, but they get shipped around. So I think every location has a basic library, where they have the most common materials that they can use for their references. The more obscure stuff, where we don't have a lot of material and that we don't see every day, that is kept in Bangkok. But we have a parallel digital collection to it. So all of that material is put in a database, which is accessible to any of our gemologists. So a gemologist in Tokyo could be looking at all the data we collected on a stone, which is physically in Bangkok, but would have access to all that data from their desk in Tokyo. And if it is really necessary, we can ship those stones over to Tokyo. So that's how we use it. That's how we take that to a next step.
More questions? Yes, right here.
Can you talk about that issue in terms of the kind of data that's being examined to make an identification?
We'll talk about that tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I don't want to give everything away yet.
I guess you guys are going to have to be back. Any more questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you.